The days passed, but Lysera's cycle continued to press against her control. Even with proper ventilation restored, the intensity of her biology made small tasks exhausting. The glowing patterns across her skin pulsed more frequently now, reflecting her growing strain. Ethan noticed her shifting in discomfort as she tried to maintain composure. "Lysera, do you need a break?" he asked gently one afternoon as she sat at her desk, fingers clenching the tablet she worked on. She shook her head, her long hair brushing her shoulders. "No, I must endure. I will not fail." "You're not failing," Ethan said softly. "I can see it. You're holding on, but it's okay to let someone help, even in small ways." Her violet eyes flicked to him, a mixture of doubt and curiosity. "Help from a human?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "I don't mind. I want to help." She hesitated, then exhaled slowly, a faint shiver running through her body. "Very well, but only if you promise discretion. Any mistake could invite shame." "Even with you, I promise," Ethan said. "No judgment, no rumors. Just support." The hours stretched long. The dormitory outside was filled with students moving freely, but inside their room time seemed suspended. Ethan suggested small tasks to keep her mind occupied. A painting exercise to map the stars, a story about Earth's festivals, even a simple game of observation where she described constellations and he tried to identify them. To Ethan's relief, Lysera responded. Her glowing pattern softened slightly, her voice steady for short moments. "Your methods, they are distracting. Effective, I appreciate them." "Good," Ethan said. "We'll keep going." Slow steps, one task at a time. For a while, the room fell into a rhythm. Ethan's calm voice, his presence, and the small routines gave Lysera a sense of control she hadn't felt since her cycle began. Yet as the day wore on, the strain began to build again. By evening, her body signaled the peak of her cycle. She trembled slightly as she walked to the viewport, staring at the stars as if drawing strength from the galaxy itself. Ethan noticed the tension in her shoulders, the faint quiver of her hands, and the quickening of her breath. "You're struggling," Ethan said softly, taking a cautious step closer. "I am managing," she replied, her voice tight. "But the peak, it approaches. I cannot allow a loss of control here, not in front of anyone, not even you." "You won't lose control," Ethan said firmly. "You've done amazingly well, and I'm here with you, every step. You won't be alone." Her gaze met his, and for a moment she seemed unsure. Then a faint sigh escaped her lips. "Perhaps it is easier with you." Ethan felt a surge of relief. "Then let's make it easier." He suggested they use meditation techniques she had mentioned before. They sat cross-legged on the floor, close but not touching, and Ethan followed her instructions. He focused on breathing, slowing his heart rate and visualizing calm landscapes. He guided her through each step, speaking softly, describing the motions of Earth's rivers and the sway of tall forests. At first, Lysera struggled. Her glowing patterns pulsed rapidly, her breathing uneven. But gradually, under Ethan's patient guidance, she found a rhythm. Her trembling eased, and the bright flashes across her skin dimmed to a gentle, steady glow. You are helping," she whispered. Her voice was quieter now, more even. "I did not expect such assistance from a human." Ethan smiled faintly. "I told you. I'm here. That's what matters." For the first time since her cycle began, Lysera allowed herself a moment of rest. Her body relaxed just enough to show her trust. As the night deepened, the two spent hours in quiet companionship. Ethan told stories of Earth's festivals, describing colorful lights, dances, and music. Lysera listened carefully, occasionally commenting on the similarities and differences with her own culture. "You humans, your celebrations are chaotic," she said with a hint of amusement. "Yet there is joy, freedom, not structured, not disciplined, yet meaningful." Ethan laughed softly. "Yeah, we're messy sometimes, but we find ways to make it beautiful." Lysera's patterns flickered, shimmering softly. "Perhaps there is a lesson here. That strength does not always come from control alone. Sometimes it comes from connection, from sharing the burden." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. That's why we're here together." The glow from her skin dimmed further, almost like a smile. "Yes, together." As the night wore on, the peak finally began to pass. Lysera's breathing slowed, and the tension in her muscles eased. She looked at Ethan, her violet eyes calm but filled with a quiet gratitude. "You stayed," she said softly, when others would have judged. When my own kind would have scolded. You remained. That is rare. That is strength. You stayed strong too, Ethan replied. You faced something incredibly difficult and you didn't let it defeat you. Not completely. Her glowing patterns pulsed faintly, a gentle wave of silver and blue. It is easier. With someone who understands. Someone who does not fear the struggle but accepts it. Ethan smiled. Then I guess we make a good team. For a few minutes, silence filled the room, but it was a comfortable silence. The hum of the station, the distant sounds of other students, the soft glow of Lysera's skin, it all combined into a quiet harmony. By the time artificial night ended and the station's lights brightened again, the cycle had ebbed almost entirely. Lysera sat near the window, her body calm, her patterns now gentle and soft. She turned to Ethan. You have given me peace, she said. Something I never thought possible during this time. No human ever allowed me such comfort. Ethan's chest warmed. I'm glad I could help. You didn't have to go through it alone. Lysera's lips twitched, a subtle sign of amusement and relief. Perhaps this unexpected encounter was meant to teach us both something. Not only endurance but trust. Not only patience but understanding. Ethan nodded. And maybe it's the beginning of something more. For the first time, Lysera allowed a faint smile to appear, her patterns glowing softly like the last light of a fading star. Perhaps. In that moment, they both understood that their bond had deepened. What began as a challenge, surviving the intensity of her cycle together, had transformed into mutual respect, trust, and companionship. Something neither expected but both valued deeply. Outside, life continued on the station. Gossip still existed, but inside the small dorm room, two beings from very different worlds had created their own world of understanding, patience, and quiet strength. And in that shared space, Ethan realized that some encounters, unexpected, challenging, and even difficult, could change lives in ways that no one foresaw. Morning light filled the dorm room, painting the walls in pale gold. Ethan stretched and glanced at Lysera, who was sitting by the window, her violet eyes reflecting the soft glow of the stars fading into daylight. Her patterns shimmered gently, the last traces of her cycle fading away. Feeling better? He asked quietly, moving toward the desk to start breakfast. Lysera turned her head, studying him. Much better. Your guidance?
Your presence?
It steadied me. I did not expect that a human could be helpful in such a way. Ethan smiled. I guess humans are full of surprises. She blinked, a hint of amusement in her glowing eyes. Indeed, I see that now. The dorm room felt peaceful for the first time in days. No tension, no whispers of gossip, no glowing bursts of uncontrolled energy. Just two roommates quietly sharing the space they had built together, learning from each other in small, meaningful ways. Later that day, Ethan suggested they take a walk through the station's observation deck. Lysera agreed, and as they walked, she moved with her usual elegance. But there was a new lightness to her steps. People still talk, Ethan said, glancing around at the passing students. Lysera tilted her head. Let them talk. Judgment belongs to those who fear. I have learned that control and patience are stronger than rumor, and humans sometimes teach that lesson unexpectedly. Ethan chuckled, glad to be of service. They reached a quiet corner of the deck overlooking a spiral of stars and passing ships. Ethan gestured toward the view. Look at that. Isn't it amazing? No matter where you come from, the universe feels the same. Lysera's eyes softened as she looked out. It is beautiful. Even my homeworld's skies cannot compare to this. Mixture of motion and stillness, light and shadow. It is humbling, Ethan smiled. Exactly. That's why I love looking at it. Makes you realize some things are bigger than our struggles. As they leaned against the railing, Lysera spoke quietly. Ethan, I have endured many cycles, many challenges, but I have never had someone stay with me. Help me without judgment, without fear, without expectation. That is rare. Ethan looked at her, feeling a mixture of pride and warmth. I didn't do anything special. I just didn't leave, I guess. Sometimes that's enough. Her glowing patterns pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. It is more than enough. That is trust. That is strength. That is connection. Something my people often fear or ignore. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that what had begun as a simple arrangement, sharing a dorm room, had grown into something deeper, a connection forged through patience, respect, and shared endurance. The next few days passed smoothly. Classes resumed their normal pace, and rumors had mostly faded as the other students saw that Ethan and Lysera remained calm and composed. Their interactions were respectful, quiet, and steady. Ethan continued telling stories, sharing little pieces of Earth's culture, teaching her about music and festivals, and occasionally asking her to explain Veyrums in return. Lysera. The next morning, the quarantine continued. The station announced that repairs would take several more hours. Ethan and Lysera remained in their shared room, the silence between them both comforting and tense. Lysera sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the distant stars. Her patterns flickered faintly, a subtle reminder that her cycle was still active. Ethan noticed how she avoided sitting at her desk, how she shifted her weight constantly, as if the confinement made her body uneasy. "I never realized how different your species is," Ethan said carefully, trying to keep his voice calm. "Back on Earth, we don't have cycles like yours. We just deal with stress in different ways." Lysera turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Stress is not the same. This is biology. It is discipline and survival. To ignore it is weakness. Discipline?" Ethan repeated. "You mean, like training yourself to stay calm?" "Yes," she said simply. "Control is everything. If we lose it in front of others, we lose respect. Even family members. Even friends." Ethan considered this. "That must be really hard, especially when you're stuck here with no privacy." Her gaze softened and she exhaled slowly. "It is difficult. I am alone in my struggle, yet not alone. That is confusing." Ethan nodded. "I get it. I really do. But maybe you don't have to be alone entirely. You've got me here. I'm not going to make things harder." Lysera's eyes flickered. For a moment she seemed unsure, like she wanted to speak but didn't. Then she said quietly, "Humans, you are not like the others. Many do not understand our ways. They mock or fear. You, listen." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. "I'm listening. That's what matters, right?" She nodded once, her expression unreadable again. By mid-afternoon, Ethan noticed the first signs of tension from others in the dormitory. Through the thin walls, he could hear whispers, laughter, and curious murmurs. He frowned. "Sounds like someone's talking about us." Lysera's ears, or the small, sensitive ridges on her head, twitched. "They are curious. Or judgmental. Do not concern yourself." But concern filled him anyway. He had seen alien students cast sideways glances, pointing at their door, whispering in hurried tones. He knew the galaxy was still wary of humans. Some species had never lived alongside humans peacefully. The idea that a human could be sharing a dorm room with a Veyari during her vulnerable season was enough to fuel gossip. As evening approached, a group of 3 students appeared at the door. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Lysera," one of them said, stepping forward. He was from a neighboring alien species, tall with rough green skin and small horn-like protrusions on his head. "Do you realize what you are doing?" Lysera stood slowly, her patterns glowing faintly, signaling tension. "I am enduring my cycle," she said evenly. "I am not harming anyone." The green-skinned student frowned. "Humans are not supposed to be involved. It is improper. You risk embarrassment for both of you." Ethan stepped forward, hands raised. "We're not doing anything wrong. She's fine. I'm fine. We're just staying calm." "Calm?" Another student hissed, purple-skinned with glowing eyes. "You call this calm? Your proximity could provoke her cycle." "It is reckless," Lysera's voice cut sharply, but not with anger, more with authority. "Enough." The room went quiet. The 3 students blinked at her glowing eyes, suddenly aware of her strength and presence. "I will not allow your words to shame either of us. Human, do not fear. You have done nothing wrong." Ethan exhaled slowly, relieved. He had expected some level of confrontation, but he hadn't imagined Lysera would defend him so firmly. The 3 students left, muttering under their breath, clearly chastened. Lysera turned to him, her expression softer. "You see, even when others judge, a strong presence protects you." Ethan smiled faintly. "I didn't feel protected until you said that." She blinked, a hint of amusement in her violet eyes. "Then you are learning." As the hours passed, the 2 fell into a quiet routine. Ethan tried to make the room comfortable for Lysera despite the lingering confinement. He fetched small trays of station-supplied food, opened windows for circulation where he could, and spoke gently, telling stories from Earth to distract her from the rising tension in her own biology. Lysera, for her part, began to respond more openly. She told him about her childhood on Veyr Prime, how she had learned meditation techniques to endure the cycle, how her family valued control above all else, and how failure meant shame not only for her but for her clan. "You carry great responsibility," Ethan said softly. "Even now, stuck here, you keep your focus. That's incredible." Her pattern shimmered faintly, almost like a soft smile. "It is not pride. It is necessity. Survival is not always about strength of body. Often it is the strength of mind." Ethan nodded, impressed. He had always thought humans were strong in their own way, but hearing her words made him realize that strength could take many forms. Lysera's calm, her control, her dignity under pressure, it was a kind of courage he had never seen before. Late into the evening, the ventilation system groaned again. The air grew warmer, heavier, making Lysera shift uncomfortably. Ethan noticed her jaw tighten and her fingers flexed against the desk. "Do you want me to help?" he asked quietly. Lysera's gaze met his, steady yet vulnerable. "I do not know if help is possible, but your presence is tolerable. More than that, your attention is soothing." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if he fully understood the meaning, but he nodded. "Then I'll stay. I'll keep talking, keep the air light." For the rest of the night, he did just that. He spoke softly about Earth, about mountains, oceans, festivals, and celebrations. Sometimes he asked her questions, and she responded with short, careful words. Slowly, the tension in her shoulders eased. Her skin patterns dimmed to a gentle glow, no longer flashing brightly. By the time artificial night ended and the station lights brightened, Ethan realized something important. Lysera was still struggling, but she had begun to trust him. She allowed him into a space no other had been permitted, a space of vulnerability and need, and Ethan understood. In that quiet moment, that the unexpected encounter he had feared might be difficult was instead building a bridge between two species. Respect, trust, and understanding were forming quietly in that small dorm room, stronger than any gossip or judgment outside its walls. The day after the ventilation malfunction, the station finally restored proper airflow. The quarantine ended, and students began moving freely through the halls. For Ethan and Lysera, relief should have followed, but the air of tension did not fade so quickly. Ethan noticed the subtle glances, the whispers, and the occasional stares as they left their room. It was clear that the news of a human sharing a dorm with a Veyari during her cycle had spread faster than either of them had expected. "People are talking," Ethan said quietly as they walked down the hallway. Lysera's patterns flickered faintly, signaling discomfort, curiosity, some judgment. "You must ignore them. Humans are different, my kind. We endure scrutiny." "Ignore them?" Ethan asked, skeptical. "That's easier said than done." Lysera's eyes met his. "Then focus on what matters. Our control, our purpose. That is all." Ethan nodded, though he still felt uneasy. As they approached the common area, a group of alien students stepped into their path. Their expressions were tight, eyes narrowing. One, a tall being with copper-colored skin and long braided tentacles, spoke first. "You are the human who stayed in her room during the cycle," he said, voice cold. "Do you understand what you risked?" Ethan straightened. "I didn't risk anything. She's fine. I helped her, that's all." The copper-skinned alien snorted. "Humans do not understand our ways. Your presence could have dishonored her, embarrassed her before her peers. You are reckless." Lysera's violet eyes flashed, and her patterns glowed softly with a silver-blue intensity. "Enough," she said calmly but firmly. "You speak without knowledge. He did nothing wrong. In fact, he acted with more respect than many of my own kind would dare." The group blinked, startled by her calm authority. One of them muttered something under their breath and stepped back. Another tried to speak, but Lysera's gaze silenced him instantly. Ethan exhaled slowly, relieved but also a little awed. He had expected conflict, but not such sudden vindication. Lysera's presence alone had shifted the balance, demonstrating her strength despite her condition. "Thank you," he whispered quietly once the group left. Lysera's gaze softened for a moment. "Do not thank me. It is not a favor. I merely speak truth. You have earned it. Ethan nodded, feeling a strange pride. He had learned that strength could come in many forms, not only from physical ability but from integrity, courage, and presence. The next few days were a test of patience. Classes continued, and Ethan and Lysera maintained their careful routines. But gossip spread like wildfire through the dormitory. Whispers followed them in corridors, glances lingered a moment too long, and some students deliberately kept their distance. It was exhausting, but Ethan refused to let it affect their bond. He shared more stories from Earth, talked about music and festivals, and sometimes, when Lysera allowed, taught her simple games that helped her focus her mind. One afternoon, as they sat by the window overlooking a swirling nebula, Lysera spoke quietly. I have observed humans closely, she said. Your patience. It is unlike my kind. You endure difficulty with humor, with calm. You do not judge the weak, you respect even when it is inconvenient, Ethan shrugged. Ethan shifted the small duffel bag on his shoulder as he walked down the bright corridor of Orion Trade Station's Interspecies Academy dormitory. The polished walls hummed softly with the energy that powered the station, and dozens of alien students passed by him, speaking in languages that blended into a strange musical noise. Ethan still wasn't used to it. A year ago, he had only known Earth and its cities. Now he was living among beings from across the galaxy. He stopped in front of a door marked Room 42B. His name was glowing faintly on the panel beside another he didn't recognize, Lysera of the Veyari. Ethan took a deep breath. He had heard of the Veyari, though only in passing. Tall, graceful, quiet people with patterned skin and glowing eyes. They were known for their discipline and elegance. Ethan had never spoken to one directly. The door slid open and he stepped inside. The room was simple but comfortable, with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a large viewport showing the swirl of nearby stars. A faint sweet smell hung in the air like fresh rain. Near the window stood his new roommate. Lysera was taller than Ethan expected, nearly a head above him, her posture straight and proud. Her skin shimmered faintly with silver blue patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Her eyes were an unusual shade, a deep violet that almost glowed. She turned her head when Ethan entered, studying him quietly. You are human, she said. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of formality. That's me, Ethan said with a small smile. He set down his bag on the empty bed. Ethan Ward, nice to meet you. She inclined her head slightly. Lysera. For a few moments, silence filled the room. Ethan wasn't sure if she expected him to keep talking or stay quiet. He cleared his throat and said, I guess we'll be roommates for the year. I'll try not to snore too loudly. Lysera blinked, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back toward the window. I value order and quiet. If you respect that, we will not have conflict. Ethan chuckled softly, though she didn't seem to find it funny. Understood. He began unpacking his bag, placing a few books and personal items on the desk. He felt her eyes on him every now and then, but she said nothing. He wondered if she was always this serious or if she just didn't like humans much. Later that evening, Ethan tried to break the silence again. He had finished setting up his side of the room and Lysera sat at her desk writing symbols in a glowing tablet. So, Lysera, he began, where are you from? I mean, your homeworld? She paused, fingers hovering over her tablet. Veyar Prime, it is not a place humans are permitted. Right. I've heard it's beautiful, though. Lysera finally turned, her violet eyes meeting his. Why do you ask? Curiosity or politeness? Both, Ethan admitted. I figured since we're living together, we should at least know a little about each other. On Earth, roommates usually talk about where they're from, what they like, stuff like that. For a moment, she studied him again. Then slowly, she set down the tablet. Veyar Prime is covered in silver forests and oceans of deep blue light. Our skies are filled with crystal storms that sing when they move. It is not like your Earth. Ethan's eyes widened. That sounds amazing. Something flickered in her expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening. And Earth? What is it like? Ethan brightened. It's messy. Busy cities, noisy streets, oceans that smell like salt, and mountains that scrape the sky. It doesn't sing like your storms, but we've got thunder that shakes your bones. Lysera tilted her head slightly. Thunder? Yes, I have read of this. A sound like the world breaking. Ethan grinned. Yeah, that's about right. The silence that followed felt lighter than before. Over the next few days, Ethan learned little pieces about Lysera. She woke early, meditated by the window, and spent long hours studying. She kept her side of the room perfectly neat, while Ethan's was already a bit scattered. She rarely laughed, but once when he spilled a drink all over his notes and cursed under his breath, he thought he saw her lips twitch upward. Still, there was a tension in the air he couldn't explain. Sometimes Lysera seemed distracted, her hand trembling slightly when she reached for something, or her gaze drifting to the stars as if she was holding back a storm inside her. One evening, as they both sat at their desks, Ethan asked gently, "Are you okay? You seem, I don't know, restless." Lysera's shoulders stiffened. For a long time she didn't answer. Then she said softly, "It is nothing you need concern yourself with." "But there are reasons I must keep distance." Ethan frowned. "Distance?" She nodded. "My people follow cycles. Soon a season will begin for us. It affects our minds, our bodies. It is a time when we are vulnerable." She hesitated, her voice tightening. "It is not wise for me to share space with others, but the academy assigned this room, and I could not refuse." Ethan leaned back, unsure what to say. He didn't fully understand, but he could see the seriousness in her eyes. "Well," he said finally, "if it ever gets difficult, maybe I can help. Or at least not make it worse." Her gaze softened again, and for the first time she gave the faintest smile. "You speak as if you understand. Perhaps you do." That night, as Ethan lay in his bed staring at the glow of the stars through the viewport, he thought about his new roommate. Lysera was unlike anyone he had ever met. Beautiful, distant, disciplined, and yet there was something fragile beneath her calm exterior. He didn't know what this season she spoke of truly meant, but he had the feeling that whatever it was, it would test both of them in ways he couldn't yet imagine. For now, though he closed his eyes and listened to the quiet hum of the station, unaware that this was only the beginning of an unexpected encounter that would change both their lives. The days passed quietly, but Ethan could feel something shifting in the atmosphere of the small dorm room. At first it was little things. Lysera paused longer before answering simple questions. She stared at the window as if waiting for something far away. When she walked, her usually graceful movements carried a faint tremble, as though invisible weight pressed against her. Ethan noticed it one morning when he woke early. The station's soft artificial sunlight had just filled the room. He rolled over and saw Lysera sitting cross-legged by the window, her violet eyes glowing faintly. The silver-blue patterns on her skin shimmered brighter than usual, pulsing gently like waves. She didn't notice him watching at first. Her breathing was slow, deliberate, almost forced. Then, as though sensing his gaze, she turned her head slightly. "You should rest," she said quietly. "I couldn't sleep," Ethan replied. "You look different today." Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable. Then she stood in a single smooth motion, brushing past him toward her desk. "It is nothing. Only the cycle." "The cycle," Ethan repeated. He remembered her warning on the first night. "You mean the season you talked about?" Lysera did not answer right away. She adjusted her books, stacked them in neat rows, and finally said, "Yes, it begins soon. Already I feel its touch." Ethan wanted to ask more, but something in her tone told him not to push. That evening, strange noises echoed through the dormitory halls. The usual background hum of the ventilation system sputtered, followed by a deep grinding sound. Lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. Moments later, a voice rang through the speakers. "Attention, ventilation malfunction detected in Section 4. Quarantine procedures engaged. Remain in your rooms until further notice." Ethan glanced at Lysera. She was standing stiffly, her hand gripping the side of her desk. Her skin patterns flared brighter in the dim light, like liquid silver glowing beneath the surface. "Well," Ethan said, trying to sound calm, "I guess we're stuck in here for a while." Lysera's breathing quickened. "This is all not good." "It's just the vents," Ethan said. "They'll fix it. Happens sometimes back on Earth, too." "You do not understand," Lysera whispered. She pressed her hand against her chest as if steadying herself. "For my people, air circulation is vital. Not for survival, but for control. Without proper flow, the scent of our cycle grows stronger. Contained space makes it worse." Ethan frowned. "So being locked in here makes things harder for you?" "Yes." Her eyes glowed brighter now, and she turned away, facing the window. "You should stay far from me." Ethan stayed where he was, though concern filled his chest. Lysra, we're in the same room. There's not much space for distance, her shoulders tensed. Then you must at least say little, do little. Any disturbance will make control weaker. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay, I'll keep quiet. Hours passed, but the quarantine remained. Ethan tried to distract himself by reading one of his textbooks, but it was hard to focus with the tension pressing against the room like a storm cloud. Every so often, Ethan glanced at Lysra. She sat by the window again, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Her silver patterns glowed brighter, then dimmed, then brightened again as though her body was fighting some invisible force. Finally, Ethan couldn't hold his silence any longer. Lysra, he said softly, you don't look okay. Is there anything I can do? She turned her head sharply, her glowing eyes fixing on him. For a moment, he thought she might snap at him. Instead, her voice came low and strained. You can listen. Ethan set his book aside. I'm listening. Lysra closed her eyes, breathing deeply before speaking. When the cycle comes, our minds are tested. Our thoughts scatter, our focus shatters. We must isolate ourselves to endure. It is not illness, not weakness, but a truth of our kind. Without solitude, shame follows. Shame? Ethan,